discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good evening, it's 8 o'clock. Coming up tonight, is Cressida Dick's departure the perfect time to rethink policing in the UK and get back to law and order? And after better figures on the economy, just how good could it get? All of that coming up, but first let's give you a full news update.
Thanks, Alistair. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. The Foreign Office is urging British nationals to leave Ukraine while commercial means are still available. Speaking in Moscow earlier, the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace warned Russia could invade Ukraine at any time. Russia has repeatedly denied plans to invade its neighbour, despite placing more than 100,000 troops at the border. Ben Wallace said he hopes there's a way forward after today's talks.
I was clear about the tragic consequences that any invasion of Ukraine could have. We listened to the assurances given by Minister Shoigu and indeed General Gerasimov that they would not invade Ukraine. And we urged dialogue as a way through to address any concerns that the Russian government may have.
President Joe Biden is also urging US nationals to leave Ukraine. It comes as America's National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, is warning that Russia is prepared to launch an attack within the next week.
We are in the window when an invasion could begin at any time, should Vladimir Putin decide to order it. I will not comment on the details of our intelligence information, but I do want to be clear. It could begin during the Olympics, despite a lot of speculation that it would only happen after the Olympics.
In other news, the Home Secretary says the next Metropolitan Police Commissioner, who will replace Dame Cressida Dick, faces stark challenges. Priti Patel says the culture at the force and the behaviour of its officers needs an overhaul by a new leader. GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White has this update.
Here at the Home Office, Priti Patel has confirmed that she has now begun the process to find a new Metropolitan Police Commissioner. Any replacement for Cressida Dick, she says, would have to show strong and decisive leadership to deal with the institutional issues that have plagued the Metropolitan Police in recent years. It is also the most political of policing roles, having to straddle the competing demands of a Labour London Mayor and a Conservative Home Secretary.
A Canadian region has declared a state of emergency in response to protests against COVID restrictions. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford says he'll urgently enact laws to crack down on interference with the free flow of goods and people. Lorry drivers have been blocking roads in the capital, Ottawa, all week. And in the UK, economy grew by a record 7.5% in 2021, following a large fall the year before due to the pandemic. Official figures show GDP grew by 1% in the final quarter of last year, despite the impact of the Omicron variant in December. Spain has dropped its travel entry requirement for British children over the age of 12 to be fully vaccinated. They will only have to show proof of a recent negative COVID test instead. And fully vaccinated passengers don't need to take a test when arriving back in the UK. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Alastair Stewart.
Bethany, thanks very much indeed. TV has a fascination with policing, from the evening alt days of Dixon of Dock Green, via the hard-drinking, tough-talking stuff of the Sweeney, to the intrigue, corruption and internal tensions of the Line of Duty. They tend to reflect, like any good drama, the mood of the moment. In the high drama of Cressida Dick's sudden but perhaps inevitable departure from the Met yesterday, much of the talk was of racism, homophobia and sexism. That, in no small measure, was due to the appalling revelations about Charing Cross and some of its officers. There was also a lot about bodged decision-making over the investigation of the shenanigans at Number 10, the horror of the murder of Sarah Everard by a serving officer, and the policing of the Black Lives Matter protests. But what was there less about? Well, it was about coppers enforcing law and order. Home Secretary Priti Patel said today the new commissioner must be, and I quote, focused on the basics, including tackling the abuse of women and girls, drugs and knife crime. One can but hope. There wasn't much either on how bad people get to join the police in the first place and even rise through the ranks. There are also complex questions about the leadership of a force of 33,000-odd officers and thousands more support staff, and how the tone is set from the top in a way that it filters to the front line. And what about who gets to be middle managers running places like Charing Cross, and how are they chosen? The buck stops at the top, for sure. But if there are many villains in this piece, it isn't only the Commissioner. It's an army of others in the middle who consistently make mistakes or allow folk under their command to make grave errors and even commit evil crimes. Finally, there's the issue of who puts the very top people in place, the Commissioner and other Chief Constables. Prior to 2012, a Chief Constable was responsible to a police authority. In England and Wales, the Chief Constable's now appointed by and accountable to the Police and Crime Commissioner of their service, or to an elected mayor, who may also dismiss the Chief Constable. Interesting to note that last night, commentary came from across the country. It isn't just the Met that is causing concern amongst you. I saw many say, you should see Scotland and what Sturgeon's up to. Others spoke of their concerns in their necks of the wood. The overriding theme was, let's have less concern about race, homophobia and sexism, and just a little bit more about law and order. Doing more about knife crime and drug running, as the Home Secretary herself said. Making the streets safe again, making folk feel safe in their homes, and confident that their car won't get nicked and that they won't be burgled. And if that does happen, that it might just be investigated, that arrests might just be made, and that prosecutions might even follow. Isn't now a perfect moment, not only to get the right person in at the Met, and that's pretty urgent, but also to take the time to ask, is this how we want the UK policed? Do we want police and crime commissioners, or might the old police authorities with local voices to the fore be better? One comment summed it up for me. The Met's core problem. The biggest problem is the contamination of a once fine force with the toxic tenets of rampant wokeism. Policing should be about protecting the public, not social engineering. Given the Met also has responsibility with the security agencies for the national effort on counter-terrorism, Should it not be a government appointment exclusively accountable to the Home Secretary? And might we even risk thinking about doing away with county constabularies and having a national police force? Well, joining me now to talk about that and more is the Conservative Chair of London's Police and Crime Committee, Susan Hall. Susan, great to see you. Was Cressida Dick's departure about priorities or about competence?
I think the way that Sadiq Khan has handled this is appalling. He should have, if he lost confidence in her, I'm surprised he then renewed her contract only a couple of months ago. And if he'd lost faith in her, I think he should have talked to her behind closed doors, not in front of anybody. But I have to say, Alistair, this is why I love GB News, because you're the only ones that even recognise wokeism. So I absolutely applaud you for that.
Well, then let me come in on that. Don't all citizens, and I made clear in my introduction, not only London, we're talking to former Chief Constable of Gloucestershire in just a moment, don't all citizens just want to feel safe?
Absolutely. Absolutely they do. And they want petty crimes dealt with. If you look at we call them sanction detection rates of burglaries, etc., issues solved, they are woeful at the moment. And the saddest thing is that we've got just a 52% approval rating of the police, the Metropolitan Police. It's the lowest it's ever been. And that's really sad because there are so many officers out there, the majority of officers that work so hard, are very brave. And
totally agree with that, Susan, but you're the chair of the committee. How did you let so much political correctness creep in?
Oh, it's not for me to make those decisions. We look at various aspects of policing. It's not for any chair. I've only been a chair a couple of months, but it's not for the chair of that committee to do that. MOPAC really oversee the police, and Sadiq Khan in London is the Police and Crime Commissioner, so he does that. We scrutinise what's happening in various small areas. But, I mean, quite frankly, this wokeism is very much a lefty thing in general, and, I mean, London has got mainly lefty politicians.
Has it also got lefty middle managers? Because I tell you what also strikes me about the police is that the recruitment is to blame for people getting in, like the one who murdered Sarah Everard, like the ones who got up to such appalling behaviour at Charing Cross. Somebody saw them, read their CV, interviewed them and said, yep, you're our type.
Yeah, vetting there's clearly a problem there. But I tell you what, a couple of months ago on one of the committees, on the police committee, I wasn't chair then, I asked the Deputy Commissioner what they did about whistleblowing. And I said, is there a good system for whistleblowers and their anonymity? And he said, no, there isn't. We shouldn't have that, and we don't have that. Well, my suggestion to whoever takes over was put in a proper whistleblowing system. Now, it might then turn up a lot more problems and be bad or worse to start with, but then perhaps people would feel empowered to whistleblow on people that they know are doing these dreadful things, as has been evidenced from this last IOPC report.
It's also, I think also the finger of blame is pointed fair and square at the middle managers, senior officers who aren't chief constables, but they run the show on the day-to-day basis. And whether it's Charing Cross or wherever, they're the men and women who run the show each day under whom these people are operating and getting up to no good, rather than getting out there and nicking thieves and arresting drug runners and knife wielders.
There are good and bad in every organisation, as you know, Alistair. There are 43,000 staff, I think, including officers in the Metropolitan Police. That is one hell of a staff. And you only need a very low percentage of people that are up to no good to give them this dreadful reputation. And as I've just said to you, I feel so sorry for all those that are doing so much work for us behind the scenes.
Final point, what one thing would you do, not just for London, but for the entirety of the United Kingdom, to make policing better?
I'd make sure the comms was much better on all of them. I'd want people to know just how many good things the police do, because my goodness, the public don't see the good things that go on. But I'd also make sure that there was a proper whistleblowing facility for police officers to have anonymity. If they see something going wrong, they should be able to have a method of letting their seniors know without fear of losing their job or having a problem within work.
Susan, good to talk to you. Thank you for your time this Friday evening. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Well, as I promised at the beginning, for thoughts beyond London, I'm delighted to be joined by the former Chief Constable of Gloucestershire, Timothy Brain. Timothy, good of you to find time for us this Friday evening. Before I come to the questions I've written for you with the Gloucestershire hat on, that point Susan finished on about whistleblowing. When you were running Gloucestershire, if somebody saw wrongdoing, was there a mechanism whereby they could safely let you know?
Yes, absolutely. There was a whistleblowing policy. It had been in place for some time. There were examples of it working successfully. So the short answer to that is yes. And if the Metropolitan Police doesn't have one, I'm very surprised. And if it had one once upon a time and it hasn't got one now, it's a retrograde step. So I'm perturbed by that news, but I'm surprised by it as well.
Noted, and I'm gratified for the short, sharp answer on that one. OK, I wanted to start by asking you this. As I said to Susan, most folk out there, whether it's in London or it's in Gloucestershire or wherever, just want to feel safe and confident getting on with their lives and that the wrong uns will get caught and will get locked up. In your view, is sexism, racism and homophobia getting in the way of that job?
It could well be, because when you say people want to feel safe and secure, that's an ambition that the police have for the whole community. And if there are people who feel threatened by homophobia, by sexism, by misogynist behaviour, then the police have to have an alertness to that and the capability to combat that. It's a very difficult job for the police these days. They're pulled in so many directions. I retired over 10 years ago, and it was a complicated enough job then. It's got far more complicated since, and they've had to deal with more complex things that happen in society at a time when, for many years after 2010, they were suffering severe cutbacks to the extent it made it very difficult to do the kind of neighbourhood policing job that you've been talking about. So the wheel is getting put back on, but only slowly and not yet far enough.
Yeah, I completely understand that, and 10 years is an intriguing period, because I guess we wouldn't have had this conversation 10 years ago, although I remember Macpherson, Stephen Lawrence case and institutional racism within the Met. But does that sensitivity to what Susan called wokeism, does it mean that we are now condemned to having policing done as if coppers were walking on eggshells?
Well, they've certainly been pulled in a lot of different directions. Stop and search is a litmus test for the police service, and they certainly, just looking at that single operational policy, have been pulled in many, many different directions over the last 20 or so years. It makes it a very difficult job for the police. I think what the police would expect around some of these sensitive community issues is consistency. But let's be quite clear, what we have in this country is a system called policing by consent. It's been built up over generations. It's a really good system. The essence of it, though, is that the people who are policed support the police. You can only get that by not being over-authoritative and by using your powers sensitively. You've got to use the powers, but you've got to use them with the support of your community. And that has to be worked for day in, day out.
Yeah, for those who aren't in the know, but you and I are, it's a very strong element of the Peel principles as well, the original charter that Robert Peel crafted when the very first police force was published. An individual constable owes his or her loyalty to the Crown. Does having a police and crime commissioner getting in the way of that help or hinder someone like you trying to do your job as you were until 10 years ago on behalf of the good people of Gloucestershire?
I believe the institution of police and crime commissioners was a mistake. I think there are better ways of providing local police governance. I think, in fairness, the old-style police authorities had their day by 2010, and there was a democratic deficit opening up in policing at that point. Policing is always going to be a balance between the operational need, the local need, and the national need. And you've got to keep those three things always in balance. And I think the idea of the tripartite system that I've just described is a sound one, but that the police and crime commissioner element of it could be best done with a directly elected local police committee.
A very, very important point. We also now have a national crime agency, which we didn't have 10 years ago. But isn't there also an argument to look again at having a national force, doing away with county constabularies, having a national American-style force, which Charles Clarke, when he was Home Secretary, looked at back in the 90s?
Well, Charles Clarke looked at amalgamating police forces from about the current 43 in England and Wales to about 17 to 18. The primary motive behind that was more central control. Let's be very clear about that. More central control for national politicians, reducing the local element. Now, if we take the United States as an example, yeah, there's one national policing agency, the FBI, for federal crimes, but then there are lots of other national agencies that sit alongside them, like the National Drugs Enforcement Agency. And then there are a myriad of local police forces. So many, in fact, we don't know how many. Some are quite large, New York, San Francisco, LAPD. Others are tiny. And some are overly sensitive to local political influence. So I don't think the American model is one to follow. I think if one of the problems that we have with the Metropolitan Police is just how big it is. It's 43,000 people working in the Metropolitan Police, covering 7.5 million residents, more people coming in on commuting and visiting. It's a behemoth. It takes a huge amount of running. I don't think the answer is to create even bigger behemoths around the country. I think you want to keep policing a sensible balance between the operational need and the local need. 43 forces isn't perfect, but it's about the right balance, in my opinion. And I would argue very strongly for a continued devolved structure. But, and I will just say this, I think there is, and I thought for a very long time, it is unnecessary for the Metropolitan Police to continue its lead counter-terrorism role. And I think that could properly be put into a national dedicated counter-terrorism agency, properly accountable to the Home Secretary. That certainly could be done, and that would enable the Metropolitan Police Commissioner to focus more and more on that vast community of London.
Timothy Brain, a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for your time, joining us live there from Gloucestershire. Thank you, sir. Absolutely intriguing stuff to view from outside London. Horrified that there isn't a whistleblowing system in the Metropolitan Police. The PCCs do not help chief constables do their job, but there is a democratic deficit so that your voice is still heard in how people like him do their job or did their job. I'm delighted to be joined by my third and final guest, who unfortunately had a little technical problem with pictorially, so therefore he joins me on the telephone. Former Detective Chief Inspector with the Met Police, Peter Kirk. And Peter, can you hear me all right?
I can. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. One point that Susan mentioned and Timothy did as well, the absence of a whistleblowing system within the Metropolitan Police. So if bad stuff is going down, as was in Charing Cross, people can't safely and with confidence tell anybody.
They certainly used to have a whistleblowing number, and it was there last time I looked, but that was some time ago. If it's been removed, then I think that would be a mistake. An organisation the size of the Met, whatever it does, needs to have some sort of scope for dealing with whistleblowers.
OK, well, we'll look further into that as well, but thanks for giving us a former Met view on that. Is Cressida Dick's departure, in your view, about priorities, politics or competence?
Politics. None of the things that she's allegedly been dismissed for or very few of them, are directly her responsibility at all. Those that are, we're talking about judgment calls and people saying, well, her judgment was wrong, but a judgment call is a judgment call. We won't all agree on them. And there's you need to be able to draw an absolute line where you say, well, that is wrong, but these are just alternative, different ways that would be acceptable decisions to come to and move forward. So it's very difficult to criticise people over judgment calls.
Yeah.
The competence doesn't come into it to a certain extent around her communication style, her willingness to talk with the media. Some of those things, yes, but in terms of operational competence, no. This is a decision, and I do not like it.
Did the fixation with sexism, racism and homophobia play a part of it?
Ironically, she's got a lot of criticism, and the Met's got a lot of criticism for doing things that are seeking to break down those issues around homophobia and racism and such like. And not just the Met, the police service generally. So, when it comes to violence against women and girls, for instance, there was criticism of officers for taking part in a bit of a publicity stunt by a charity that involved walking in their shoes for a while, women's shoes for a while. And the stunt was that you tried on a pair of high heels or whatever. And, the police have been criticised time and time and time and time again for those sorts of things. But those are the sorts of things that are essential in any sort of attitudinal change programme. They're not easy, they're not cheap, they take forever, but they have to be done with a whole range of different aspects to them. Yeah. And the police get criticised for political correctness gone mad. Why don't they just carry on catching burglars, sort of thing? You can't have both.
Well, I wish to God we could have the last one. We've only got a minute left, I'm afraid, because it took time trying to sort out the technology, and I profoundly apologise for that. But
no problem.
Final point, 2 questions in the last minute then. First of all, if you were to restructure how we do policing in the UK, A, would police and crime commissioners survive? And B, would the county constabulary and the Met survive?
No, not in their current form. And no, they wouldn't. If I was to do it, I would have a national police organisation delivered policing-wise locally, so at borough level, with a chief superintendent or thereabouts in charge at borough level, probably answerable to the local authority. So a head of policing, where you've got a head of social services, head of education, whatever, but with a national oversight in terms of what they actually do. So delivery is local, but oversight is national, probably with some sort of regional arrangements for specialist stuff, but local policing delivered locally.
So that structure of having regional constabularies would survive?
Not a constabulary as such, because this would be quite difficult to achieve.
All right, so smaller units, but accountable to the community.
Effectively, ordinary policing, all the day-to-day stuff delivered locally, borough level, chief superintendent in charge, liaison with the local authority, and if you wanted some sort of PCC type arrangements, that would have to be within that sort of local council sort of setup.
That's absolutely intriguing. Again, apologies for the technical hiccup, but my goodness me, it was worth it doing it on the phone. Thank you very much indeed. Good of you to find time for us this evening, and hope to talk to you again. Thank you very much indeed. Fascinating stuff there. Different views from the front line as well as the political view at the top of it. And I hope that may not have made your minds up, but the whole purpose of this conversation was to say, here's a problem, what might the solutions be? And I don't think the police and crime commissioners came out of it very well. And I certainly don't think that wokeism came out of it very well. I was tweeting about this earlier on the day, and you, our lovely viewers, have been tweeting back at me and at GB News about how policing in this country is structured, who appoints whom and to whom they are responsible. Robert says, sadly, the writing was on the wall nearly 20 years ago, followed the closure of regional training centres and that once world-renowned centre of policing excellence, Brams Hill, all deemed to paramilitary and barriers to diversity. I could go on. Chakravarti says it might help if some of the police sort of caught up with what's OK and what isn't. Malcolm says policing in England's always been politically neutral, as it should be. Then along came Theresa May, who knew nothing about policing and valued it even less. Her PCCs, that's the Police and Crime Commissioners, are by definition political because they're elected. They have no place in policing. 2 out of 3 in favour of that tonight on the programme. It doesn't need to be democratic. And we also decided that we'd run a poll tonight. We only launched it about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago. Goodness me. With Cressida Dick's departure, is it time to look at policing right across the UK as a whole? The results were yes, 86%. No, it's doing just fine, 14%. And well over 2,000 of you bothered to vote. We're going to leave that up there and see how it progresses throughout the evening. After the break, despite Partygate and police investigations, the journalist Fraser Nelson thinks that Boris Johnson might just survive. Is he right? I'll be talking to MP Craig McKinley right after this.
We've got a big Saturday for you on GB News. From 6 a.m, it's breakfast with Stephen and Anne. At 10, join Esther and Philip for the Saturday selection. Alistair, Darren and Nana take you through the day. And don't miss Neil Oliver Live at 7 p.m. At 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight, followed by Headliners. That's Saturday on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Partygate. Do not throw things at the television screen, please, or pull the radio plug out. It is in the headlines every day. It's not my fault. And Boris Johnson is right in the middle of it, with various accusations about his attendance at alleged parties in Downing Street, police investigations underway, and the press think, well, they think they can smell blood. But now, a whisper from some quarters of the media, and indeed political circles, is starting to get louder. Journalist Fraser Nelson, he edits The Spectator and is a regular columnist in The Telegraph, encapsulates it in his column in The Telegraph today, and I quote, "Boris might just survive this." Well, joining me now is the Conservative MP and Johnson loyalist, Craig McKinley. Craig, I'm going to take you back a little bit because I think within it we may find an important clue or two. You urged support for Boris Johnson in 2019 for his hope, dynamism, enthusiasm, plus the right policies, especially Brexit. Has he begun, up to this point, to lose his way?
I mean, I've had some concerns about the direction of some Conservative Party policies, not least net zero, and I'm on GB News talking about that quite often. But yeah, he brings that political dynamism, that bit of electricity to politics, which saw us over the line very, very handsomely in 2019, a little over 2 years ago, with just a shade under 14 million votes. So yeah, when Boris is on good form, he's really got it. There's no doubt about that. I was canvassing last week in the constituency, and that was coming through from people I was talking to, and very strangely, a very elderly couple that you'd think might have a very high moral high ground, and so they should. They were not. They were talking about Partygate, but they were saying, "Oh, we do like Boris. Oh, he's been silly, but we like him so much. He's the man for us." So, on the doorstep, I think we're seeing something rather different from the wall-to-wall Partygate, birthday Partygate, Prosecco Gate, and all the rest of it that we're seeing on some elements of the mainstream media, not on GB News, thankfully.
Yeah, well, OK, but on the mainstream media, The Spectator and The Telegraph both, which Fraser Nelson has a direct connection with, he edits one and he writes for the other, they've had a really serious downer on Johnson for quite some time and been a part of it. But today, what Fraser seems to be suggesting is that because of all of the difficulties and the letters going in calling for his head, Johnson has basically been corralled by people like you, his own MPs, who are saying, you get back on the straight and narrow and actually we will look after you. Craig McKinley, is that what is happening?
Well, I've always found the Prime Minister to be receptive. I mean, he will always talk to various colleagues. The ERG that I'm a part of, the CSG, the COVID recovery group that I'm a part of, listened to us, I think, on some of those aspects. I'm certainly hoping he's going to start listening to my net zero research group. So I don't think that's changed. I really don't think that's changed. But I think, as Fraser Nelson and others are saying, that perhaps the worst of this is past. None of it is good. I mean, I cannot say this was good. This was very poor human resources and administrative failures in Downing Street. There's been a number of changes, some mini cabinet reshuffle as well, which I'm very happy with. So perhaps he is back on track. I think the Downing Street operation, very difficult to say. Is the boss of every single department and everything happens? I'm not sure that's entirely true in any organisation. But of course, the buck stops with the boss. But he's made due apologies. I expect there'll be more to come. And I hope we can get back on track with a Conservative agenda with that enthusiasm and popularity that we saw just a little over 2 years ago. Now, putting this in context, I can't even imagine what President Putin must be thinking when he's having his morning caviar. He must be laughing at the UK press. He can't believe, what is important in life when he is amassing troops on the Ukraine border.
I think it was another very famous Russian who used to talk about useful idiots, about which I've also written on social media. Yeah, go on.
Can I liken this to probably one of my favourite Fawlty Towers? I think it's probably everyone's, and that's the German one, if you remember. At the end, got the German shaking his head going, how did they win the war? I mean, this must be how Putin is perceiving this. And I would imagine many administrations around the world are saying, I don't know where Britain has descended to. They're a powerful nation. They're striding the world stage again. I mean, you only had to see, I think, Boris's warm reception he had in Poland and in NATO yesterday. And I think the world realised Britain is back. It's putting its money where its mouth is on standing up to Putin and supporting the Ukraine. And they must think, well, what sort of country has it become? They seem to be worried about birthday cakes and Prosecco. I mean, I really, frankly, couldn't believe it this week. The Daily Mirror scoop, which was the tinselated party, or it was the online quiz, I think it was. That was on, across the media a year ago or so. And because they had a photo from a different angle and saw the Prosecco bottle, that caused another range of outrage. I hate to think if it had been a bottle of champagne where we'd have been, but there we are.
Final question flows immediately from that anyway, because that Quiz night is now also on the list of events that the Met are investigating. If the Met investigation does find against the Prime Minister, or if the full Sue Gray investigation inquiry finds against him, will there be 54 plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 letters? Will he face a challenge and will he lose it?
Well, as we know, there are a number of letters in. Some colleagues have gone very public over the last few weeks. A lot of those are old enmities that have come to the surface. Who knows, are there some sort of Brexit overtones coming through? I felt that was true of John Major yesterday, doing his best to have a blue-on-blue attack. It never looks good when past prime ministers attack current administrations, but there we are. But no, it won't be good if there's a fixed penalty notice. But let's put this into context. It's a fixed penalty notice. Would we be asking for the Prime Minister's head if he'd gone a few miles over the speed limit and received 3 points on a licence? I know it's a different context because, the world was in lockdown and these rules had come out of Downing Street and Whitehall. So, of course, it's in a different dimension. But if we look back at this in a few years' time, and it's big if the Prime Minister goes over this whole saga, I think we'll be shaking our own heads and going, I don't believe what was happening back then, because it was a distant memory, a very poor event, should have been handled better, shouldn't have happened at all. But I hope we can get this on track. I am still supporting the Prime Minister, and I hope other colleagues, whatever wounds they've got, will heal and we can get on as a united party.
Craig, good to talk to you. Thank you for your time this Friday evening. Always good to see you. Craig McKinley there, speaking on from his home there in Thanet, down in the far corner of Kent. Now, waiting in the wings, you might argue, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer. He says his predecessor, Jeremy Corbyn, was wrong on NATO and that his party's commitment to the alliance is unshakable. He also said he supported Boris Johnson's action on the Ukraine crisis. His comments have received criticism from some of his own. Labour MP Diane Abbott and Sir Keir's deranged support for NATO risked an unmitigated catastrophe in Ukraine. She and Jeremy Corbyn said he was just a warmonger. Well, to discuss this with me now is the former Labour MP and indeed Minister, Dennis McShane. Great to see you and thank you for coming in. Always kind of you to do that. Embracing NATO, standing four square, this is grown-up stuff as well, with the government on Ukraine. It's not quite a Clause 4 moment as with Tony, but it's significant.
It's important. It's what Keir stands for. It's where the country on the whole is. Putin is a thug, a bully, and a dangerous kleptomaniac. Unfortunately, he's got a red carpet welcome here in London, especially from Boris Johnson, because the Tory party depends so heavily on Russian donations.
It's what you would like to hear him say, from where you stand in the Labour movement.
Well,
do you believe it? Because he used to stand foursquare behind Jeremy, trying to get him elected, and Jeremy wanted out.
No, I mean, Jeremy, I don't think Labour ever stood on a platform of leaving NATO. I mean, that was never, I think, the policy. If it was, I think the party would have split right down the middle. Jeremy is who we know. I mean, he's never seen a policy of defence that he liked. He's never been particularly critical of pretty miserable left-wing dictatorships around the world. We know that. That's okay.
But does it matter that he and Diane Abbott say today that this is not credible or it's wrong?
No, forgive me, it really isn't. I mean, I think there's a lot of criticism about how everybody's handling Ukraine. The Ukrainian government keeps saying they're not going to invade. We don't believe this. But every 5 minutes, Boris Johnson says again, the invasion is imminent. He's running around, a bit like my dear old friend Liz Truss in her black fur hat, doing a sort of Disney World impersonation in Red Square, when in fact it was very warm, unseasonable weather. I mean, all the Russians were there in some light jackets saying, well, who's this English lady in her big fur coat and fur hat? And then when she talks to the Russians, the horrible Russian foreign minister, Mr. Lavrov. I'm pronouncing it the Russian way. Lavrov.
Oh, sorry.
He says to her, well, are you really saying that Russian troops can't be in Rostov and in Voronezh? And she says, no, they must withdraw immediately. And the British ambassador has to pull her and say, sorry, Secretary of State, they are actually in Russia. So I mean, there's a bit of a problem when you don't know core geography when you're Foreign Secretary.
Let me haul you back to the core question, though, because now perfectly reasonable criticism, and you're not the only one to make it. Some of her own friends have made a similar point, particularly those in the Rishi Sunak camp have made very, very similar points. But a viewer just about an hour ago told Michelle Dewberry's programme here on GB News, the real problem with Starmer and NATO is that Labour's just becoming Tory light. Policy by policy, it's polling, not policy.
Well, that's simply daft. NATO was founded by Ernest Bevin, Labour's Foreign Secretary after the war, in alliance with European countries like France and Italy. With all the Macron bashing here would have made no sense to Ernie Bevin or to Clement Attlee. Pulled in the Americans, and we forged an alliance that kept the peace and stop Russian aggression.
But the general point on Tory light and policy, those great leaders, Attlee, Bevan and people that you quote and others, we can both go back a long, long way, would never have told Unite, or it would have been TNGWU in those days and before, get your tanks off my lawn, I'm going to run Labour as I want to, and would never have said Labour is the real friend of business. They simply wouldn't have said that.
On the contrary, Clement Attlee and Ernie Bevin did more to drive the hard left, the communist left, the pro-Soviet left, the anti-common sense economic left out of the Labour Party. I mean, they were expelled, they were suspended, they were brutal. There's this cosy vision in my political family that after the war, Attlee was a great socialist and all the rest of it. Well, he was, but my God,
but not a communist.
Not just not a communist. He really said, you get out of the party, don't get your tanks off my lawn. Labour has to stand for democratic values. We've just won the war thanks to Labour patriotism after the disgraceful appeasement of Neville Chamberlain and the Tories before 30.
Final one and very quickly, for which I apologise. Tony Blair in the Times today, Keir's a work in progress. Accurate or sour grapes?
Not at all. I think that's exactly it. Keir Starmer is growing with every day, I think. I mean, I have my doubts about him, but if you measure him in terms of ethics, of truth, of just honour, decency against the current Prime Minister, Craig McKinley talked about whether it's like getting points. Points on your record. Well, there was a big minister who had to quit Parliament because he lied about his points. It's not the point. It's not the point. It's the lies.
Dennis, we must leave it there. Always a pleasure to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Great pleasure.
Thanks for breaking into your evening for us. Dennis McShane there, former Labour MP and indeed Labour Minister. After the break, Gibraltar's playing hardball over Brexit, as chiefs there tell the European Union and the United Kingdom that they are preparing to walk away from Brexit negotiations and are planning for a no deal. More on that with Conservative MP Andrew Rossendale right after this.
We've got a big Saturday for you on GB News. From 6 a.m, it's breakfast with Stephen and Anne. At 10, join Esther and Philip for the Saturday selection. Alistair, Darren and Nana take you through the day. And don't miss Neil Oliver Live at 7 p.m. At 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight, followed by Headliners. That's Saturday on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It is a tiny territory that belongs to Britain, but is situated at the southern tip of Spain, jutting out into the Mediterranean Sea. It may be small, but it has a loud roar, as Gibraltar's chief minister has warned the EU and Spanish government that he is prepared to walk away from Brexit negotiations as the rock ramps up preparations for no deal. The government of Gibraltar has released a Guidance to Citizens booklet, which outlines plans for the future of the British Overseas Territory if the UK and European Union fail to reach a Brexit agreement. So, what does that mean for Gibraltarians, and what does it mean, if anything, for us here in the UK? With me now live in the studio is a long-term friend of Gibraltar, Conservative Member of Parliament for Rumford, Andrew Rossendale. He's a member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee and, vitally, chairman of the UK's all-party parliamentary group on the British Overseas Territory. Is this a real threat, or is it war games?
Oh, absolutely. We should walk away if we can't get a good agreement with the European Union. We shouldn't put up with them dictating to Gibraltar. This is a British overseas territory, and we must stand with Gibraltar. Of course, it would be much more sensible for all sides if we could come to an arrangement which was sensible and workable. But if that's not possible, we have to be prepared to walk away. So the Gibraltar government are right. Well, essentially, as with all things EU, lots of technical things that need to be ironed out. But also, there's always this fear that what they're trying to do is to encroach in terms of sovereignty. And the Spanish, of course, are very much in favour of encroaching on sovereignty as well, because they see Gibraltar as theirs. So what the government of Gibraltar have clearly said, and they're right to say this, is that they won't agree to anything that changes the fundamental relationship with the UK or harms the prosperity of Gibraltar. So they're right to take a hard line.
You well know that one of my best friends from university days is active in Gibraltar politics and a recently retired lawyer down there. Speaks highly of its economic viability, its financial services. Yes, it's off-sea, and some people don't like that, but that's what they do, as do Jersey and Guernsey and what have you. Could it go it alone? Economically?
Oh, no, I don't think there's any question of that. Gibraltar is a British overseas territory. They're not seeking independence. They're not seeking any kind of separation from Britain. In fact, everyone I speak to in Gibraltar wants to stay British forever. They don't want to separate their links to the UK. And they've had a referendum, in fact, making that clear.
Yeah.
So that's
phenomenal numbers. I mean, making it very clear.
Yeah, about 99 point something percent. So, you know, it's absolutely clear that that's never going to happen. But what we want is a sensible arrangement with the European Union, because Gibraltar's not connected to the UK geographically.
Yeah, sure.
They have a border with Spain. But all they want is a sensible relationship, a workable relationship with their nearest neighbour. So it's in everyone's interests to come together and forge a working relationship, but sovereignty cannot be negotiated. And the moment there's anything that fundamentally changes the relationship between the Gibraltarian people and the British people, that cannot be permitted.
When you look at it, does Good Friday Agreement, Northern Ireland Protocol come wafting across your well-informed little mind as well?
Obviously there are parallels because there's a border, but history is very different. I don't think the two issues are the same. But what the Gibraltarian government...
But into some of the issues are. I mean, the parallel is not direct, to completely accept that. But who looks after borders, who checks goods coming in and going out? There are similarities.
There are similarities, but what the Gibraltar government are hoping for is that there can be pretty much an open border. It's a very small territory. A lot of Spanish workers come over the frontier every day to work.
Sure.
So if that were to stop or there were to be restrictions, it's going to make it very difficult for Spanish workers. So EU citizens coming in to Gibraltar.
Well, when Franco famously closed the border, it destroyed businesses on both sides of the border.
Indeed.
Final one, and a quick one, which I warned you when you kindly came in. Liz Truss clearly very busy on Northern Ireland, quite rightly. That's what she's been doing today, and Ukraine in recent days. Is there a danger that she takes her eye off the Gibraltar ball, or is there a good junior minister in command?
She better not, because she'll have me and many others on her back if she does. Gibraltar's British. We cannot negotiate anything that waters down that relationship with the United Kingdom. Fabian Picardo, who's a superb Chief Minister of Gibraltar, is going to stand firm, and the British government has to stand firm for Gibraltar as well, and I know that Liz Truss will do just that.
And I think she may well have heard just that. Andrew Rossendale, genuinely a pleasure. Always good to see you. And thank you very much indeed. See you again soon, I hope. There we have it. So the view from here, when he was saying us, he meant the UK, but he also meant a little bit of us and the UK and Gibraltar. Always good to see Andrew. Good news this Friday evening. Today we learnt that the UK economy rebounded last year with growth of 7.5%, despite falling back in December because of Omicron restrictions. The Office of National Statistics figures show that it's the fastest economic rebound since the Second World War. But it's also where we were pre-coronavirus. So how do we build back better, as the phrase goes? And as we face a cost of living crisis, is this as good as it gets? Well, joining me now is business and economics commentator Justin Urquhart Stewart. Justin, always a pleasure to see you. I mean, just a headline grab, as it were. It's good news, but there's still a good way to go, is there not?
Well, it is good news, certainly that. I mean, these figures are really very dramatic, but put them in perspective. But we have to bear in mind, in 2019, we actually saw a drop-off there of over 9%. So the fact that we've come up by 7% is good, but it doesn't actually put us back where we were. We're still way back. But the good news is, there's growth, and that's encouraging. Not just with us, but also around the globe. That's encouraging. But we're now reaching a stage which is going to make it more difficult, because where does the growth come from? When you've got a series of issues, particularly affecting in Britain, we've got tax rises, national insurance issues, we've got issues over power elements, all of those issues coming together to lose that, or not lose, but certainly weaken that vital word for the economy, confidence coming through.
Totally. We've also, Justin, let me butt in. We've also now got Jacob Rees-Mogg as Minister for Brexit Opportunities. What are they and how significant are they?
Looking forward to finding out.
Look, I think he's either... Have we lost him? Oh, we have lost him. I am so sorry. I think what he was going to say was we look forward to hearing what those Brexit opportunities are. But unfortunately, we have lost Justin Urquhart Stewart. No, we're not going to get him back. So let me just reprise very, very briefly, if I may, our top story tonight. There is still a poll there on Twitter for you to let us know whether you think this is an appropriate moment to rethink policing. We had three great guests at the top of the show. A woman who chairs, that's Susan, the London Committee, former Chief Constable of Gloucestershire, and also a former senior officer here in the Met. Headlines, too much wokery. Not enough straightforward hard-hitting on law and order. The structure, perhaps a work in progress. We'll return to it. Thanks so much for joining us. It's been great to have you here. And I'll be back again at 12 o'clock tomorrow here on GB News Television and Radio. A very good evening to you.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGiven. Dry for much of the time in the southeast during the next 24 hours, but turning wetter and windier elsewhere. However, as that wet and windy weather arrives, it brings with it milder air. Cold air is ahead of these weather fronts as they push into parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland during the evening. And as a result, well, on the forward band of the rain, there'll be some snow for a time above 300 or 400 metres across Scotland and northern England, but it doesn't last. The winds pick up from the southwest, coastal gales for western Scotland and milder air pushing in. So eventually most of this stuff is rain. It pushes into northern England, West Wales by the end of the night. Drier ahead of it, a touch of frost possible in East Anglia, the southeast, but eventually temperatures lift through the night as the winds pick up. It's a bright start for parts of the Midlands, East Anglia, southern England first thing, and skies brighten through the morning for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Blustery showers push in here, but also some sunny spells. It's in between where we've got some heavy and persistent rain. Northern England, eventually the Midlands, Wales, and then by the end of the day, Cornwall as well as Devon. Temperatures aren't up to much either, 8, 9, 10 Celsius, but not feeling very pleasant where we've got the wind and the rain. Now into Saturday night, the rain tends to sink south. By this stage, it's lighter and patchier, but during the early hours of Sunday, the next batch of wet and windy weather starts to arrive into southwest England as well as Wales. Drier to the east and to the north, some clear spells for central and northern Scotland, a few showers here. But Sunday, really, for the vast majority, soon turns wet and windy. From the west, bands of rain and wind sweep through, coastal gales for the south coast of England, and the most heavy and persistent rain affecting Wales. And really through the course of Saturday and Sunday, because of the accumulated rain, we could see some issues here. Monday is also very changeable, with spells of rain or showers moving south, likewise on Tuesday.